Solving quadratic inequalities is not as simple as it looks. Many people might be tempted to square root both sides, but then they get an answer that looks like this. And you can't really be less than -2 and less than 2. That really doesn't make too much sense. And it's also not the right answer. We can find the right answer by thinking about this graphically. If we have the graph of a parabola, x squared, and we're sort of subtracting, or trying to find something that's less than 4, the only region that would work would actually be this region. And this region is -2, 4 to 2, 4. These would be the points on the parabola, right? And so our interval actually should be from -2 to 2, which is going to be answer choice C. Now, is there a better way to understand this or do this problem instead of just graphing it? Because we don't always get to graph it, and there is. We can treat this like any other quadratic equation. We're trying to solve for the zeros or the solutions. So we can subtract 4 on both sides. And then we can factor out the original expression, something that looks like this. These zeros will serve as special points. They're basically the zeros of the quadratic. But we want to kind of find, well, for this quadratic, we want the value to be less than 0. So we know that at -2 and at 2, it's going to cross 0. It's basically going to be equal to 0. But we kind of want to know, well, what happens here, what happens here, what happens here, right? Is the graph going to be something that looks like this? Is the graph going to look something that looks like this? And the graph could also look differently, right? Maybe it's just something that looks like this, but that's unlikely because we don't have a 0 in between. So we actually know what it already looks like. This is a upward facing parabola. So it's going to look like this. So the only region that's negative should be this region. But if we wanted to, we could test some points. So we can just choose a point. Like let's say we test -3 and we test like 0 and test like 3. If we plug it into the initial inequality, we can get the points that we are looking for. And in this case, if you plug in, let's say -3, the value would end up being positive. If you plug in 0, you get a negative answer. And then you plug in 3, you get a positive value. Right? Which means that if you're looking for the place where the quadratic is less than 0, it's only going to be from -2 to 2. Try your hand at this problem, which is very similar, but slightly different than the one I showed.